Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another lecture in platform technologies. In the previous weeks, we have been discussing about some of the fundamental concepts about computers and computing. And in the last lecture, we discussed about processors, which are the foundational computing units or programs running in a computer. So, in this week, we are going to continue from that and discuss about scheduling. So, when we have these multiple programs running in a computer, what we would have is a computing environment. So, this is you can think about any standard computer that you are using now. So, you would be running a number of programs. There would be a number of processes running there in parallel. So, that is what we identify as multi-programming computers. So, computers that can run multiple programs at the same time. So, in such situations, we would want each of those programs to be able to use the resources of the computer and spend some time in computing. So, if they have to use the CPU and other resources, we want all of the programs to be able to do that. So, that aspect of sharing these resources among all the programs is what we try to do through scheduling. So, what we can see here is it is like the CPU, the main computing unit of a computer is going to be the CPU, the central processing unit. So, that is the one that is going to execute all the instructions, all the program code is going to be processed, computed at the CPU. So, all of the processes would need access to this CPU. All of them would have instructions that will have to go to the CPU to be executed. So, the main challenge that we will have to solve is when we are running these multiple processes at the same time, all of them would want to use the CPU. So, here we are making an assumption that this computer that we are talking about has only a single CPU. So, if there is only a single CPU, that means it can only execute a single instruction at a time. So, it can come from any one of those processes. So, then what we will have to do is we will have to give turns. So, because it is a single resource that is only available for one process. So, each process will want a turn. So, then we will give it a chance to run one after the other. So, that aspect of giving the chance to run the process on the processor one after the other is what we mean by scheduling, or that is what we try to do through scheduling. So, when we think about processes, we would have a number of we would have like two different ways of thinking about these processes. So, say you have a process, like when we say a process, it is going to be a set of instructions. So, it is a set of instructions that is saying something to the computer. It is saying do this, do that. So, that set of instructions. So, if these set of instructions can be continuously executed without stopping or without any need for stopping, then we would identify that as long CPU burst. So, when we were looking at processes, we identified these process states, and we identified sometimes processes get blocked due to input output waiting, and they go into blocked state, and then they come back to ready state and continue to run. So, if we have a process that can run for long time, we would identify that as a long CPU burst. So, that is, if given a chance, this process can use the computer for a long time. This can continuously execute instructions without the need to stop. It may still stop at certain times, but for most part, it will continue to work without stopping. Whereas there will be certain other processes that will have stopping quite a lot for input output purposes. Say, for example, if you think about a program where it is asking you for input, so it is coming up and say, what is your name? So it's like few prompts are coming to you and you have to type some input for it to continue working. So whenever it asks for an input, until that input is received again, it will have to stop and wait. So these processes will wait for a lot of time. So most of the time they will spend waiting for whatever input output activities. So those type of processes we would identify as IO bound processes because they have short CPU burst. So when they have long CPU burst, we would call them CPU bound processes. So processes that are using the CPU the most. Or when we have short CPU burst processes, we would identify them as IO bound processes. Again, we will think about this when we are thinking about scheduling. So why we may do that is, not all processes are going to be equal in terms of what they need to do with the processor. So different processes may have different needs. Say one process may be very IO heavy and that may stop a lot from utilizing the CPU, whereas another process may be very process heavy, very CPU heavy, so it will use the instructions a lot and it will continue to run. And there may be a third process that is somewhere in between. So when we have these different type of processes, again that will also decide on how we will treat in terms of giving a chance. So if you think about, like, say there's a shared resource among in the university and it needs to be given to the students, and you may sometimes make a decision which of the students will utilize that more or use that more, and maybe give them more chance or give them more time with that resource. And then there will be other students who will not use that resource a lot, and so you may give them less time, say like a laboratory equipment or a computer or something. And if you are not going to use that a lot, you may not be given a chance like that when we have these shared resources. So we have a similar situation here. So when we think about processes and like these different type of processes, then the main reason why we go into thinking about this scheduling is because we are running this multi-programming environment. So what we have here is we are having multiple programs running one after the other, running in parallel, and we are utilizing the computer more like that. Because again, if we go back, if we have a long CPU burst computer, then the time that is normally wasted without any computing is this. So this time is normally wasted. Still it is a wasted time, but overall not a lot of time is wasted. But if we have a IO bound process, in an IO bound process we have a lot of time that is being wasted throughout. So the CPU is not doing anything. Say if we are running only this process, if we only run this process, a lot of the CPU time is wasted here. These times are the CPU is not doing anything. So for that reason, we will use this multi-programming. So have multiple programs. So whenever one process needs to stop, we can bring in another process to run. So the CPU can be continuously utilized. So the CPU can be continue to be used. Say for example, you were using a resource, you were using the laboratory computer, and now when you are not using it, we can ask another student to come and use it, and then maybe if you come back again, maybe you can be given a chance after that student has finished. So that is what we would try to do through this multi-programming approach. So one of the ways that we could do process switching, or like switching between processes, we can let one process run. So we will start with a particular process. So we will say we will start with process A that is running, and then that stops at a particular point in time. Then we have process B. Process B will start there, and then it stops, and maybe then A can continue to run. That is what we sort of previously looked at when we were thinking about this context switching. So we can switch from A to B and back and forth. But the issue, or the thing that we have to look at is, here B is waiting for all this time, and if that is an acceptable thing. Again, think about your laboratory example. You are two students are going to use the one computer that is there. Like say it is a particular type of a computer, laboratory equipment that all of them need to use for a practical, for example. So then one student is using it, and if that student keeps on using for like 8 hours throughout the day, the other student cannot use it at all. So they have to keep on waiting, and that may not be something desirable, because the other student cannot do anything. They have to wait until this process or this student finishes. So similarly with processes, that may not be desirable. So we have to think about certain things as which process is running, or which process gets to use the CPU, and also for how long it will be running. So we'll also have a time limit deciding, okay, after 1 hour you stop and give the chance to the next person, and maybe another 1 hour later you may get the chance again. So that is the sort of basic idea of trying to do scheduling in multi-programming computers. So with this shared CPU among multiple processes, we will try to give which process gets to use the CPU at a particular point in time, and for how long they can use that. So those are the decisions that we will make in scheduling. So now the main thing that scheduling will have to decide is, say again, if we go back to the previous week's discussion about these process states, processes can be in a running state, or a blocked state, or a ready state. So in running state only, they are going to execute continuously. So what the scheduling will do is, it will look at anything that is in a ready state, and then it will decide which of those can go to running state, and then also bring that whatever that is in the running state back to ready state. This loop between ready and running state is the main activity that would happen in scheduling. So it will mainly look at all the processes that are there in the ready state which can be put next, and it will also look at for how long the current active process is running, and then decide, okay, now it's the time to switch to the next process. So then by switching that, the process will get to utilize many of the resources that are allocated to that process, like the CPU, like the hard disk, and so on. Now that process is able to utilize those resources. So the operating system component that will do the scheduling, this scheduling component, these activities built into, the operating system component that is called the scheduler. So scheduler is the part of the operating system that will do this scheduling activity, and it will use what is called a scheduling algorithm to make these decisions. So the decision about which process to run, for how long to run, and all these will depend on whatever the specific scheduling algorithm that is being chosen. So we will look at some of those examples later on, but main thing to remember is it could be based on a particular algorithm, a particular mechanism that is implemented by the operating system inside the scheduler. And another thing to remember is, so if you again go back to the previous week and think about our discussion on threads and processes, we said threads are also somewhat similar to processes, and we will be able to switch between threads also, like how we would switch back or switch between processes. So in this discussion on scheduling, the things that we discuss about processes would also apply to threads. So it could be anything that can be schedulable, any entity that is schedulable. So processes or threads, we will discuss about both, and I may use the terminology as jobs to meaning either one of those. Sometimes I will say process, sometimes I may say jobs, but you need to understand both of those things can apply also to threads. Okay, so now the next question is, when do we need to schedule? So the operating system has a component that knows how to do scheduling, that knows how to look at this ready list and the running process and decide if needed, it can switch those processes. But we need to make a decision as to when we need to do that. So again, this will depend on some things that we looked at previously, like when processes start and when processes terminate. So this is sort of an extension from that, and this is about when to do the scheduling, when to do the switching between processes in that list. So the first one is, if a process is currently running, if a job is currently running and it finishes, so when it terminates, when it exits, then we'll have to think about running a new one. So if we start with a particular process and that is no longer running, so that has completed its task and it is no longer running, so then we have to give a different process to the CPU to run. So then we will go and pick a new one. So you have finished your time, so now we go and see, okay, who else is waiting, and give them a chance. Second one, again in that cycle, we said if a process blocked, if a job is blocked, that it cannot no longer run, then again, so it's going into that blocked state. So now we will look at what is next available in the ready state and take that into running. So if the currently active one goes into blocked, you will take one from the ready and run. The third category is, we give a time frame to each process. For each process, we say you get to run for 100 milliseconds. So once you have finished the chance, then you have to give the chance to another process. So again, like one process will run for 100 milliseconds, then the other one will run for another 100 milliseconds, and it may switch back to the previous one or go to a different one. But it is dependent on that time slice that we decide. So we say everyone can use 1 hour at the computer lab. So at every 1 hour mark, we will go and ask them to switch to the next person. Another one is, say if a new job is created. So if a new process or thread is created, now we have to make a decision. So say we already have some process that is running, right? Now we create a new one. So we create a new process here. So now we have to think whether to continue running this one, whether to continue running the already existing one, or stop that and run a new one. So that is also a decision that we have to make, whether we can continue to run the existing one or take a new one and run. And the last category is, say, when a process blocked for input output, so it blocked for input output and went to that blocked state. Say if it was printing a page on the printer. Now the printing has completed and it is ready. It is that the printing task is finished and it is ready to go back into processing. So now again we have a decision. Something that was waiting is now ready. So now what do? Do we continue running what we have, or do we go back to the one that is now ready and continue to let it run? So say a student has left the laboratory and gone into doing some other tasks in between, and when they come back, do we let them continue again, or do we wait until the student who is currently working to finish and then let this person join again? So again, that is a decision that we'll make when an IO interrupt occurs. So something went for an IO waiting, and when that IO blocked, and then now that IO task is complete and they are ready to run, so we have to take a decision whether to run them or continue running what is already there. So these are some of the times that we will think about when to run and when to schedule these different processes. So we have multiple processes running. Only one will be in the ready state. Others will be waiting in the ready state. Only one will be in the running state. So whenever there's many processes in the ready state, we'll have to take a decision based on what is happening to run one of those. So that is the main times. These are the sort of main events that will cause the scheduler to pick a new process to run. Is that clear? Do you understand what are these circumstances that we would do scheduling? Then, when we think about scheduling, we would also think about what is called the performance criteria. Because again, when you sort of few slides back, we said that one of the reasons why we are doing this multi-programming and scheduling is to make the CPU utilized more. Because when we have these processes waiting for input output for other reasons, the CPU is not doing anything. So we might as well give the chance for other process to run so that CPU power is utilized more. So in doing that, with scheduling, we will also focus on a number of performance criteria, a number of things that we would want to do. First one is throughput. So throughput is how many jobs we complete in a period of time. So say if we take a 1 hour period of time, within a 1 hour period of time, how many things we complete. So or like say if you are given a number of tasks, you are given like say like 10 different tasks to complete within a day, then the measure is how many tasks you complete within a period of time. Then turnaround time is the time between something starting to execute and completing execute, or something coming into execution and finishing. So say for example, you were given a task at a particular time and you complete at a later time. In between you may be doing other tasks. So the overall turnaround time is from the time you were given the task to the time you complete that task. whatever in between is also included in that turnaround time. Even though you are not working on that task, it is still the time that is spent on that task. Then waiting time is, say normally again, there is a task, there is a process, and it comes active at a particular point in time, but it is not able to run for a period of time. So only when starts to run, when it starts to actively run, we can say it is running. So say again, you are doing some activity now, and you are given another task. So I give you another task to, okay, do this as well. Because you are already doing something, you will not start on that. So you will be waiting on my task until you finish your previous task, or when you decide to come back to this task. So that waiting period before starting to run something, that is the waiting time. So waiting time is the time before you start to execute something, before you start to run something. Then another criteria that we may think about is about meeting deadlines. Again, thinking about certain processes, or even in sort of a real life scenario, you would understand, say, if you are given a number of assignments to complete, number of assignment tasks to complete, there would be a particular point in time you may have to complete that task. So if there are deadlines to some task, then we need to complete those tasks before the deadline. So if there are multiple processes running, and if some of those processes have a deadline to complete, then we should prioritize them and let them run. Say, if you have like say 5 different assignments to complete, but there's 2 assignments that have the deadline for this week, then you would prioritize those 2 assignments and finish them first before going into other tasks, other assignments. So similarly, if there are processes, if there are jobs that need to be completed within a deadline, then we will focus on those things first before moving on to running other processes. So these are some of the criteria that we will think about when we are doing scheduling. So scheduling is not just about switching between one another, but also thinking about what are these things, how we can improve the throughput, the things that execute within a time period of time, turnaround time, waiting time, or even about meeting deadlines if that is necessary for a particular process. So we will think about these things as well when the scheduler will pick a new process to run. Then when we think about scheduling, and among the processes, also we would want to be in a certain way. We would want to have certain objectives. So one is about performance. So we would want to increase performance, and we would focus on those criteria, those throughput and waiting time and so on. So that is about how we can improve the overall performance of the computer. But we would also think about the overall processes that are there and how we can consider all of them together in a particular way. So one is, we would want to be fair. So if there are a number of processes available to run, we should give some chance to every process to run. So again, in the case of students, we would want to give chance for every student to use that shared laboratory resource. Then we may also sometimes think about priority, because certain processes may have additional priorities, because those processes may be related to some key operation of that computer. Then we may give some additional priority for that process. So for example, if we have a student who needs to complete a research within a period of time, we may give them some additional laboratory time because they have a much higher need compared to other students. Then we would also want to encourage, or we also want to make sure the resources that are available are efficiently used. So if there is a process, if there are a number of processes are there, we will try to schedule it in a manner that the resources are more efficiently used. So if these shared resources, the CPU and other resources are more efficiently used, and we will try to prioritize, or we will give a chance for that as well. And then we would encourage good behavior. So if there are multiple processes, if certain processes are using too much of power or too much of resources, and like making the computer run in a sort of a more crunched manner, that may be not desirable. So we may not encourage that. Whereas if certain processes are behaving well, they are under the given conditions, they are operating in a acceptable manner, then we will try to encourage that, and we will give those things more chance. So similarly, like again going back to the laboratory example, if some students are utilizing the laboratory resources well and not doing anything undesirable, then we may give them more chances to use those resources. Then another thing that may happen is, say if we have a heavy load to run in the processor. So we have a heavy load to run, a processor that has to do a lot of computation. Even in that case, what we would want is, if we try to run everything at once and then the overall performance of the computer goes bad, that is not desirable. So we would try to manage this heavy load over a period of time, so everybody still gets a fair chance. Everybody, if there are people to be prioritized, they are prioritized. Still, this heavy load can run over a period of time. So a good example would be, say there are some processes that need smaller times in this resource, but then there's a process that needs a longer time. Then if we go and give that process that needs a longer time more continuous usage, then others are waiting for a long time. So that is not desirable. So we would make sure that this one that needs a longer time stops and runs and stops and run, but it, at the end of the day it completes, but it will be run in a different manner. Then the last thing is, depending on the system that we are running, depending on the computer environment that we are building, depending on the platform that this is being used for, we will decide how the scheduling will work. Say for example, if it is an interactive system, those are the type of computers we will interact, end users will be interacting regularly. They may have a different need compared to a computer system that is running some server-based applications without any user request. They are running some background data processing and so on. They may have a very different requirement, because like a computer that you are interacting with, say you are typing something, you expect that whatever the input you are giving to be reactive in that system. Whereas if it is something running in the server in the background, you don't really care whether that thing is completed in a particular manner. So different system, you may think about different priorities. So again, these are some of the other things that we will be thinking about when we are scheduling. So that's a brief look at how scheduling works. And now we will focus on some scheduling category of scheduling algorithms, and then also look at some examples of scheduling algorithms. So are there any questions in things that we have discussed so far? If you have any questions, just let me know and we can have a discussion about those. So when we come back into the category of scheduling, we can categorize them based on the type of systems. So first one is batch systems. So these are the ones that are running these batch jobs. So we briefly discussed about batch systems in the previous week when we were discussing processes, and this batch job can start. So that is the first one. So when we have batch system and then there are a set of jobs that needs to run one after the other. How do we do scheduling there? Then interactive system scheduling is the normal system, your typical Windows computer, Mac computer and so on. Where do you do scheduling in those systems is the interactive system scheduling. So it is fairly based on ensuring how it is interacting with different people. So you are giving an input and it is responding to that input. So that is something that we will be focusing on, interactive scheduling. Then in real-time scheduling, these are the systems that want to make sure a deadline is met. So if it is a control system in a factory, for example, we need for those things to do different tasks at a particular point in time. So they cannot miss that deadline. So real-time systems are processes that operate or work based on these deadlines. So we will focus on those when we are thinking about these real-time systems. So prioritizing about deadlines and so on will be what we will think in real-time systems. So based on these different categories of systems, we will use different set of scheduling algorithms for our scheduling. And among all these scheduling, we will also have sort of two ways of looking at scheduling or scheduling algorithms. One is called preemptive scheduling and the other one is called non-preemptive scheduling. So when we say non-preemptive scheduling, that is, say we have a process that is running now, and until it finishes all the tasks or it decides to stop itself, we will continue to run. So that process can continue to run until it needs to stop. Then we can start a new process. So the stopping happens voluntarily by the process. Until the process wants to use the CPU, it will keep on using the CPU. Whereas in preemptive scheduling, we can go into the process and say, okay, now stop, and give the chance to the other process. And maybe then we can stop the other process and give the chance to back again. So in non-preemptive scheduling, the process will stop voluntarily. So if you are using a laboratory computer, you will keep on using the laboratory computer until you finish, and then you will give the chance to the next student. Whereas in preemptive scheduling, every half an hour, it will be like, okay, your chance is finished now, next students will get to use the computer now. So that is preemptive scheduling, where a task can be interrupted and the next task can continue to run. So this is also, again, we will think about when we are thinking about these categories of scheduling algorithms. So now when we think about these systems, again we will think about, like, so we sort of generally identified some goals that we have. So we already said we want the system to be fair. So if there are multiple processes running, we want to give a fair chance to everyone. Every process gets a chance to run. So that fairness is something that we would want to make sure that exists in the system. Then we would also think about policy enforcement. That is, within a computing environment, you would have certain rules and regulations. So you would have certain policies. This is how things should happen. So if we have some rules like that, we will also try to enforce those rules in that environment. Then balance is about trying to keep all the parts of the system busy. So not just running processes that are always using the graphics processor, we would also try to use other resources and schedule in that manner. So all the resources are sort of used across different processes. So that is applicable to all the systems, all these batch systems, interactive systems, all of them will try to do that: fairness, policy enforcement, and balance. But then, when we think about batch systems only, with batch systems, what we have is that is a set of processes running one after the other, set of jobs running one after the other. So, in that case, what we can do is we can maximize the throughput. So, there's no interaction with the users. We can let it run until it finish, and we can make sure that, say, an example for a batch system would be generating telephone bills at the end of the month. So, if that is the example that we take for a batch system, what we can do is, what we are mainly focused is at the end of the day, how many bills are produced. So, that is the that it will be our goal for like improving that system. So, there we will be focusing on throughput. We'll be like, within a period of time, how many jobs are completed. Then also we will think about turnaround time. So, that is, if a job is submitted and after what period of time that job is completed. Then also CPU utilization. We would make sure the CPU is always utilized to the maximum. So, these are things that we will be focusing on in batch systems, that is throughput, turnaround time, and CPU utilization. On the other hand, when we think about, say, interactive systems, so example is any computer that you use. So, that is normally an interactive system. So, there the main thing is responsiveness. Say, for example, in a batch system, while it is waiting for a bill to be produced, the next job can be waiting, because next bill can be produced after that. Nobody is affected by that. Whereas when you are using a computer, say if you click on something, you expect something to happen. If you type something, you expect that input to go into the system. Say, for example, you have opened the web browser and you have opened a media player in the background. So, now the media player is playing some music and you are typing something on the document. And it can't be the case that when you are typing, the media player stops, because, and then when the media player is playing, you cannot type. So, it cannot be like that. You want the system to be responsive. You want all the applications, all the processes running to respond to any user interaction. So, that will be the focus. We will try to make sure anything that the user gives as an input or interact with the system is accepted. And proportionalities, users would have certain expectations. Say, for example, if I click on this screen and say move to the previous slide, for example, then if that moving to the previous slide happens after, say, 1 second, that is okay in this case. Whereas if it happens after 10 seconds, so I click on the previous button, but it doesn't go in 1 second, it goes in 10 seconds, that is not acceptable. So, we will have certain expectations for the system, and that is what we would identify as proportionality. So, with interactive systems, users will have certain expectations of behavior. So, we will want to have that, and we will try to interact with the users' responses or users' interactions in an acceptable, timely manner. So, that is the focus that will be there for interactive systems. And the third type of system that we will think about is the real-time systems. So, these are the systems where meeting deadlines is important. So, if you have a self-driving car that is going to brake at a particular point in time, it has to brake at that particular point in time. That braking needs to happen at that time. There can't be any delays in that. So, there is a deadline to be met, it has to be met. So, we will focus on that meeting deadline, and also we would want that system to behave in a predictable manner. We can't be like, when a brake needs to be applied, at one day it happens this way, another day it works in this way. It can't be like that. It has to be during a particular way of operation. It has to be in a predictable manner. So then only we can have an acceptable quality or acceptable behavior for that system. So that predictability will also be required in such system. So what you need to remember from this is there are different types of systems such as batch systems, interactive systems and real-time systems, and all these systems have different focuses or different priorities when it comes to their scheduling algorithms. So batch system scheduling algorithms have different priorities, interactive system scheduling algorithms have a different priority, and real-time system scheduling algorithms have a very different priority. So is that clear? Are there any questions on those? So now let's look at different scheduling algorithms under each category and look at some examples. So some scheduling algorithms that can be used in batch systems are what we call as first come first served or short job first algorithm. So the first come first serve algorithm is one of the basic real world algorithm that we would be familiar with a lot. So it is anything where we are waiting in a queue to complete a job. So we go to a supermarket, wait in a queue to pay. We go to a bank, wait in a queue to deposit money. So these are all first come first serve type scheduling. So the schedule when you will be served, the schedule when a process will be served will be based on who came first. So there's a single queue of waiting jobs and they will be completed one after the other. So this is typically used in batch systems because in batch systems it is okay to complete one after the other. There's no interactive need and we can typically run them in a preemptive manner. So again, going back to preemptive scheduling, that is when a process can run as long as it wants until it decides to stop, then the next process can run. So in batch systems, again, we can continue to run and finish something before continuing to the next one. Here, all the process will be considered equally. So if you go to a supermarket, normally you wait in the queue, you will wait, the next person will wait and everybody will wait in that queue and they will go and complete their task one after the other. They will go and bill one after the other. And if a running process needs to stop, for example, then it will have to go back to the queue. So again, thinking of the example of say the supermarket, if the running process blocks, so if you are waiting in the supermarket queue and now you decide to go and buy something else, you forgot to take something from the supermarket aisle, so you go back into the supermarket to find that item, and now when you come back, most likely you have to stay in the end of the queue unless you ask your friend to stay for you. That's a different thing and not part of this algorithm. But in a typical implementation of a first come first serve, if you leave the queue and go to do something else and then when you come back, you will normally join at the end of the queue. And when the first one stops or when the first one completes, the next one in the queue will go into running. So that is the basic idea of a first come first serve. It is a very simple way of operating a scheduling algorithm, and it works in batch systems because there's no interactive needs. You can continue to run until one task finishes before going into the next one. So if we look at this example, we have three processes here. So we have a P1, P2 and P3. P1, its operating time is 34 units of time. P2 is 3 and P3 is 4 units of time. And they come in this order, so they will operate in that order because it's a first come, first serve. These are the times they are going to take, and this is the order that they are going to execute. And we are assuming all of them arrive at the same time. All of them arrive at the starting time, at the same time. Now, if we think about waiting time, P1 didn't have to wait at all. It was the first one. It can start executing and complete. So P1 didn't have to wait. If we think about P2, it had to wait until P1 finishes. So it had to wait for 24 units of time. If we think about P3, it had to wait until P1 and P2 to complete. So it had to wait until 27 units of time. So now in this scenario, the average waiting time for these three processes is going to be 17 units of time. So just to understand, this is the basic way we will work. So one person will run, one process will run, then the other, and then we can calculate an average time. We will later compare to other ones to see if there will be any differences. So the main problem that we can see with this first come first serve approach is, say the process 1, it was executing for 24 units of time, and the other two processes which didn't need a lot of execution time still had to wait a long time. So if you think about the supermarket example, you go to the supermarket to buy few small items. Say you go there to buy 2 biscuit packets, and in front of you in the queue there is a person who is buying a big cart full of say 50 different items, from milk to vegetables to every possible item they are buying in a very big cart. So now you are waiting behind them in the line. For you, the billing will take say half a minute or 1 minute, and for them the billing is going to take 5 minutes. So you are now waiting for 5 minutes for you to finish that half a minute billing. So that is a problem that we have with this first come first serve scheduling, is that the things that are not going to utilize a lot of resources are also waiting a lot until the other one completes, because it is a non-preemptive way of working. So we cannot go and say you stop and bill for me. It is like only one billing is finished, the next person can go. So a solution that we can have is, we can have a couple of ways. One is, we can have what is called an express lane. So in some supermarkets, you may see they have put a signage saying, if you are buying 5 items or less, you can go through this express lane. So we can have that in supermarkets, but in the processing sense, that may not be an ideal way of thinking about it, because then we have to have different queues like that. And in batch systems, that may not be desirable also. It is a way that we can do. But another algorithm that we may use in batch systems to address some of these challenges is what is called the shortest job first. So now what we can do is, if we have 2 processes that are needing different execution times, we can let the one that needs the shortest time to run first. Say for example, if you come to the supermarket counter and 2 people are coming at the same time, one person with the big cart and one person with the small item, the cashier can ask the one person with the 2 items to you give your item first and then let the other person bill. So that way we can improve the waiting time there. The main requirement here would be, all the jobs are coming at the same time. So if you think about it, if the other person is already in the billing in the line first, then you cannot change that. But if everybody comes at the same time, then the decision about which is the shortest job can be made. So in shortest job first, the main thing is, we will compare all the available jobs and choose the one that will take the least amount of time to execute. main requirement is we should know about all the processes in advance. So the main thing we will try to do here is to improve the average waiting time. So the shorter jobs are not waiting for a long time, so average will come down significantly. So again, if we think about this example, so here we have say 4 processes with different execution times, and this is the arrival order. But in terms of execution, we are executing based on the duration. So based on what is the shortest. So here P4 will run first, P1 will run next, because 3, 6, 7 and 8, P3 and P2. So based on this, we can calculate average waiting time as 7. So that is using the shortest job first. But if we do the same thing with first come first serve, so now we will execute only in this order. So now the average waiting time is, this is why this is a bad example, because we are still not having a significant difference, but you can see it is still a comparable difference. So in the shortest job first we had 7, and here now we are having 10.25. So the waiting time is more with first come first serve compared to shortest job first. Is that clear? The differences between first come first serve and shortest job. Both of them are usable for batch systems. Both of them will entertain this finishing one job and going to the next one, the non-preemptive scheduling mechanism. But the difference is, in shortest job first, we will have all the jobs available and choose the smaller one first to run and the larger ones at last. Whereas in first come first serve, we will just execute in the arrival order. Only thing is, in shortest job first, we need to know about all the processes at the beginning for us to make that choice. The problem with shortest job first is there are 2 main problems. One is all jobs must be available at the start. So that's why it is only suited for batch systems, because like only in batch systems we will be able to know what are the available jobs and make a comparison and choose one. So even in a supermarket example, the shortest job first is not always suitable, because we will not be having everyone arriving to process at the same time. Another problem that we may have in shortest job first is what is called starvation. So say we have a number of jobs. We have a small job, we have another large job, we have another small job, another few small jobs, another large job. So now these 3 were available at first. So these 3 jobs came at first, and within those we prioritize 1, 2 and 3. 1, 2 and 3. So first this, then this. Then at this point, when 2 is executing, when this one was executing, these 3 processes came. So now after 2 is finished, we will compare these 4, this large one and these short ones, and again we will run these short ones. So now when we think about this larger job, this one is waiting a lot longer than its arrival time. So that is, it is going to wait, or the larger jobs are going to wait until all the small jobs are complete. And if there is always more new small jobs are coming, that large job will never get a chance to run. So that is a problem, or it is waiting forever, and that is a problem with shortest job. Because if we always choose the shortest job, at some point there will be a longer job that is never chosen. So that is a disadvantage or problem that we may face with shortest job first. So those are the scheduling algorithms that we may come across in batch systems. Now let's look at some scheduling algorithms that are commonly used in interactive systems. So again, in the case of interactive systems, the first algorithm that we are going to look at is what is called the round robin scheduling algorithm, and this is also one of the sort of commonly used real world algorithms that you can think. So this is simply when we were previously talking about, say, you have a laboratory computer to use and there are 5 students to use, we will give time to every student in a circle. So students will be waiting in a line. They can go and use the computer for a period of time. After they have used, they will come back and wait in the line until their chance comes again. So that is the basic idea of a round robin scheduling. So we will maintain a queue of all the processes, all the jobs, and we will take things out from the queue from the top. We will execute them, and once they finish, we will bring them back to the end of the queue. So that is the basic idea of a round robin scheduling. So again, if we think about this example, this sort of scheduling example with these 3 processes, so what we would do here is we would always, because in round robin scheduling we are also in interactive systems, we are also doing this time slice. So we will switch between processes in a time slice. So here we are not doing non-preemptive scheduling, we will be doing preemptive scheduling in real-time systems. So we will be switching between different processes one after the other. So say we will have P1, P2 and P3. We'll start in that order, we'll go in that arrival order, but after every unit of time we will switch to the next process. So we will go to P1, P2, P3, then back to P1, P2, P3, then P1, P2, P3 and so on. So we'll go in that one after the other order. So with that we will be able to calculate an average time, average waiting time that we can calculate. So again, depending on how long it takes to execute and how long they are waiting, we may have a particular average waiting time. But with round robin scheduling, we may have a number of problems. One is the time slice is lower. So say, or rather time slice is larger. So say we are scheduling back and forth with a time slice. If we schedule every one time unit, we would get a behavior like this. So here we are scheduling every 1 unit of time. Say in the same example, we are scheduling every 4 units of time. So if we schedule every 4 units of time, we will start with so every 4 units of time. So we will start with the first one. Actually the first one only needs 3 units of time. So it will complete here. So we will completely run that one. Then the second one needs 4 units. So we will run that completely. Then third one needs 3 units. We will run that completely. So what we see here is when we have a larger time slice, we will have a first in, first out, first come, first serve type of an approach. So in interactive systems, that is not desirable because we want interaction, user interaction to be responsive. So it is not desirable having larger time slice. On the other hand, if we have 2 small time slice, then what happens is we would waste a lot of time doing context switching. So now let's think about what we discussed last week. When we need to do process switching or even thread switching, we have to context switch a lot of information. We have to save things back into the process table and then read information back from the process table into the memory. So a lot of things like that happening. So that will take actually some time. Let's say the process switching takes 10 milliseconds. So if the process switching takes 10 milliseconds, and if our time slice is say 100 milliseconds, there we are wasting 10% of the time for this switching. If our time slice is say 1000 milliseconds, there the wastage is about 1%. If the time slice is say 20 milliseconds, we are wasting almost 50% of the time in context switching. So we have, depending on the system, depending on how fast it can do these things, we'll have to choose a time slice that is not too much of wastage, and the CPU utilization is affected. So in sort of typical interactive system computers, we may choose something like 20 to 50 milliseconds, and that may be an optimal number. So again, that number will particularly depend on a system and so on, but we'll have to choose a suitable number there. But one of the other issues that we may come across with round robin scheduling is, there we assume all the processes have the same priority. So we assume that all the processes that we have are taking the same level of priority. They need the same level of importance in terms of their execution. But in real computers or real computing environments, that will not be the case. Different processes will have different priorities. So for that purpose, we will use what is called a priority scheduling algorithm. So here it is somewhat similar to round robin in that we will first have a list of priorities and we will put the jobs into those priorities. Within each priority, we will maintain a queue, and in that queue, we will run in a round robin. So what we will have is, we'll have process 1, 2 and 3 likewise, and within each queue, we will do the standard round robin cycle of processes. But then we will have different priority one, so we can give more time to the higher priority processes and less time for lower priority tasks. Say for example, checking email in the background is not a higher priority task compared to displaying the video to the user. So we may prioritize displaying the video in the higher priority and email checking in a lower priority. So that is the basic idea of priority scheduling. And a last way of scheduling that we can do here is what is called multiple feedback scheduling. So this is again sort of a combined approach with all these things. So here what we have is, we not only have a queue that we can take from, we have a priority list, but then also these processes can move between the priorities. So the priority is not always fixed. At different points, a process may be at a lower priority for some time. When it needs to do some important task, it may go to a higher priority. When that important task is completed, it may go back to a lower priority. So for example, if you are say running an important processing task, and at a particular time it needs a lot of processing power, it may go to higher processing. Say for example, you are working on a document, and when you are saving it as a PDF, for example, that needs some additional processing. So at that point, it goes to a higher priority. When that completes, it comes back to lower priority. So here we can sort of manage between different type of systems or different type of processes and have them at different levels and use a combined type of an approach. So, and also we can maybe within different queues, we can use different scheduling algorithms. Say at one queue we can do a first come first serve, in another one we can do a priority queuing, and in another one we can do a round robin. So this is multiple feedback queues is basically a combination approach where you can do multiple things, or whatever the previous algorithms are combined into a single larger algorithm. So this type of a complex scheduling algorithm would be the more realistic one that we may find in real time, rather realistic operating system, real world operating system. Whereas the previous ones are more conceptually how scheduling would work, but in reality, this type of complex scheduling is what we may be encountering. Then the last category of scheduling algorithms that we may come across is the real-time system scheduling algorithms, and one of the examples that we will look at is what is called the earliest deadline first scheduling. So this is basically what we try to do here is prioritize on the task that has the earliest deadline. So a good example to think about this is your assignments, or you are studying for exams or doing your assignments. You will prioritize on the first deadline that you have next. Say if you have an assignment to complete today, that's the one you are going to work next. And if you have an assignment next week, that deadline will come later. So we will always pick the job that has the earliest deadline. So after every assignment is complete, you will decide on, okay, what is the next assignment, next deadline that we have, and you will focus on that. So that is the one that we will focus on in this type of real-time system, because that way we can make sure that we are meeting the deadline, because we are always trying to work on the item that has the next deadline, so we can always complete that one first. And sort of the last thing to remember is, in addition to process scheduling, we can also do thread scheduling using the similar scheduling algorithms. But the main difference being, we looked at that threads can be user level threads or kernel level threads. So user level threads are threads that exist inside the process, and only the process would know about that. Whereas kernel level threads, again, they exist in the process, but the kernel also, operating system also knows about those threads. So in user level threads, kernel will pick the process, then the process itself will have its own scheduler to pick the thread. So operating system that scheduler will pick a process, then inside the process there will be an implementation of another scheduler that will pick the threads. Whereas kernel level threads, the operating system or the kernel level scheduler itself can directly pick a thread. So that is the main difference that we will see between user level and kernel level threads compared to sort of processes. So what we would have is, say, if it is a user level thread, the kernel will go and pick the process, then the processor or the process will have its own scheduler algorithm. It will use that to pick the thread. So here we will have two levels of scheduling, one at the kernel level picking the process, then at the process level picking the thread. Whereas in the case of kernel level threads, all the threads are known to the operating system scheduler, so it can go and directly pick the threads. So that is the main difference that we would see between these two approaches. So that's all that we will have to discuss about scheduling in this lesson. So the main idea is, scheduling is mainly about how we are creating this multi-programming environment where we are able to execute multiple processes, and we try to improve the efficiency and utilization of computers by switching between these things. And we have a number of approaches based on different types of systems like batch systems and interactive systems and real-time systems. We can do them in different type of algorithms, different type of scheduling algorithms, and in more sort of real world scenarios, we may combine a number of these algorithms and build sort of more sort of complex algorithms, and we may use those. So those are the main topic areas that we will be covering in this scheduling. Are there any questions in anything that we discussed so far? If there are no other questions, we may conclude the lesson for the day. As always, the lecture slides and the video will be available through LMS. And if you have any questions or if you need any clarifications while you are going through those learning materials, you can always contact me either through LMS or through email. Is fine. So until next time, thank you for joining in this class. See you. Bye.